Hello, hello, excellent. I've just always wanted to do that, like run on stage when someone introduces you thing. So tick, yes. How you all feeling today? Yeah, cool. I have like a bit of a tradition. Has anyone ever been in the conference, like in the audience, conference audience? I've only had one coffee, at one of my talks before. No? Okay, excellent, brilliant. So we're gonna do a thing, and I'm gonna need you all to help me with this. So is everyone okay with like a little bit of audience participation? Yeah, cool. All right, so I just wanna test and make sure you can do what I need you to do. So I just want you to start by everyone put their hands in the air like this for me. Yeah, that was pretty good. That was like 9 out of 10. All right, if you've got things on your lap, just put them either on the seat next to you or on the floor, somewhere where you won't kick them over. And I just want everyone on the count of 3 to stand up, right? 1, 2, 3, stand up. All right, so you have both parts now. Everyone sit down again. Okay, now I'm gonna record this, because it's tradition, and this time I'm actually gonna press record and not get the end of it, and stop the recording when you start. So we're gonna do exactly what we just did, hands in the air and stand up at the same time, and you're going to start, okay, over here, and then we're gonna go this way. Are you picking up what I'm putting down now? Yeah? And then when we get to this end, you guys have the hardest job. You're gonna screw it up, it's okay, all right? But when we get to this end, we're gonna go back, all right? So we're gonna go this way and then go that way, okay? You might be familiar with this as a Mexican wave. Yeah, all right, are we ready? Okay, I'm gonna count you down. 3, 2, 1, go. Go, come on. Woo, and back again, and back. See, they always screw it up, why? The problem is that users never do what you tell them to, and unfortunately that is just a fact of life, and it's something that I'm going to be talking to you about today. So hi, my name is Jo. In case you haven't figured it out, I do a lot of conference talks. So this is a tradition that I've done at every conference I've ever spoken at. Congratulations, you're like the 15th time I've done that. And I still haven't got anyone be able to go all the way back again smoothly, so when I do, that will be the happiest moment of my life. Thanks to all of our sponsors. That was the obligatory sponsor slide there. So we're going to get straight into it. We are running a bit behind time today, so I want to get through as much as I possibly can. And I am going to talk today about usability testing. So quick question, who knows what usability testing actually is? Like 3? Super. That makes my life a lot easier. It means you don't have to unlearn bad habits. I've got a QR code on here. Hopefully it works. If you go to that QR code, it should give you like a little poll where you can sort of say what your job role entails. You can click one or more of those things. While you're doing that, I just want to talk a little bit about what usability testing isn't. So usability testing is not the same as QA. It's not automated testing, so if you thought that you're going to learn about the difference between unit tests and feature tests today, you are in the wrong place. I won't be offended if you leave. But there is a really important difference between usability testing and things like internal QA, even when it's done by a human. And that's because, as we found out when we tried to Mexican wave earlier, humans don't always do what you think they're going to do or what you expect them to do. You can give them really clear instructions about something, and they are still going to try and put the round peg in the square hole. So usability testing is a way to put things in front of our users and test it, hopefully while we're in control of being able to implement the learnings from that. Either way, your product is getting usability tested. You just get to decide whether or not you actually collect the data from those usability tests or people just go and whinge about it on Facebook, right? So let's have a quick look at our results from our poll, assuming, did it work? Super, okay. Now, how do I do this thing where I actually show the results? There we go, maybe. There, did that work? Yes, look at that. So we've got mostly development, 65%. We've got some UX, UI design people in the room, which is excellent. We've got some people who do architecture. a few people who do QA, which is excellent. I love talking to QA people. And we've got 20% of the people who, as part of their job, do some user research. Now, I would argue that everyone should be, as part of their job, doing user research, whether it is formally part of your job or not. Let's jump back onto our slides. Perfect. And I will have an opportunity for questions at the end. But I wanted to start out with just explaining a little bit about what usability testing is. And usability testing is a type of qualitative testing. So we talk about these two different kinds of user research methodologies. There's quantitative and qualitative. So what is the difference between them and which one is better is a trick question. One is not better than the other. They're just four different things. And I would argue that a lot of the time, the one that you do actually want is qualitative testing. And this is kind of a confusing thing for me to be talking about, because my background is actually, originally, I was a data analyst. Well, I was a process engineer, then I was a data analyst, then I was a developer, and now I specialize in UX research. So it's been a lengthy, windy journey, but for a very long time, I was kind of convinced that you needed to have statistically relevant sampling and data to be able to make a decision based on something. And that makes sense, right? That's the scientific method, and we are, some of us, scientists. So why doesn't quantitative usability testing work? Well, the answer is that it is great for some things, like setting benchmarks, like identifying whether or not something is better than it used to be, or is it better than a competitor's, or is it worse than a competitor's? And quantitative testing, things where we are collecting information that has a yes or no answer, or a 1 to 5 score, right? These things are really useful for identifying that there is a problem. 60% of people were able to complete your form. Wonderful. Except for what about the 40% that weren't able to complete your form? Why weren't they able to complete your form? Quantitative testing doesn't tell us the why. It only tells us the what, right? So it's really good for things like time on task and stuff like that if we're trying to prove a point to someone that there is a problem, but it's not good at helping us fix that problem. Qualitative usability testing focuses on the why. It focuses on what do people actually do when they use your product. It's really good for helping us discover the problems inside our user experience. So Kate said that we're not allowed to use acronyms. It takes too long to say user experience every time, but that's what UX stands for. UI is user interface. UX is user experience. When we are testing with users, we're not testing the interface, right? We're not testing what it looks like. We're testing whether or not they can use it. That's the whole point of usability testing. And it allows us to really, really quickly find that there are problems, but also how we can easily fix them. Make sense so far? I'm seeing lots of nods. I don't know if that's just because you're all falling asleep and you haven't had enough coffee yet, or because you're agreeing with what I'm saying. So let's have a look at how we would actually run a qualitative usability test. Cool? There are about 5 steps. I'm glad that I got that number right. It would have been embarrassing if there were 6 steps on the slide. And the very first one is actually recruiting participants. So who makes a good participant for a usability test? Is it you? It depends, but probably not, right? So the first step is to identify who are the users for this product. And the chances are high that the average user is not you, right? So you need to remember when you are looking at recruiting participants that it's not about what you like or what you would do, it's about what the average user would do. But it's also about what the worst user would do, right? So you want to try and identify who are the people that are going to have the most challenges with using my product. Is it people who don't have English as their first language? Is it people who struggle with accessibility challenges? Is it people who are a little bit older and don't realize that a hamburger menu is the thing that you tap to access the menu? What I really strongly recommend is that anybody who is looking at embarking in usability testing create themselves their own version of this form, which is the usability testing recruitment form that I use for our Mission Digital program. So we recruit usability testers. If you're interested in seeing how one is run, you can go and volunteer there. Humble plug. And we help with usability testing for charities and nonprofits that are doing cool shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but you can bleep it out later. So there are a lot of questions on there that might not make sense on the surface, but I'm going to give you an example of why we ask them. So that link, by the way, is in the QR code at the end, so if you didn't get it, don't worry. We ask about things like age group, employment, tech proficiency, but if I asked everyone here today, who is like super technical? Yeah, so like definitely less than half. Who has ever like unironically said to someone, I'm not very good with computers? Yeah, like, I see a few of you like putting hands up, like I'm embarrassed about this, but like, you're at DDD, guys. Like, you are at a tech conference right now, so when we say, are you technical? And you say no, you're looking at that through a different lens, right? Your reset is different from other people's reset. So we need to ask questions that will tell us something that we can actually measure rather than saying, are you technical? So things like, what device do you use? We ask this not because we care what device they use, but because if they answer my laptop, that tells us something. If they answer my ARM64 Windows laptop, that tells us something else, right? And it's not that they're a Windows user, it's that they understand that it being an ARM64 laptop or a MacBook Air is important, potentially for something technical. They realize that it's not just a laptop computer, and they have that sort of technical background and knowledge. So be smart about the questions you're asking people so that you can get a little bit of nuance about sort of where they sit on that technology spectrum. Another question we ask is, how do you access the internet? Because if someone's only accessing it through their phone, the chances are high that they don't work in a technical role. All right. So the second thing I will say about recruiting participants is that you should pay them if you're not a charity. And that payment could look like something different to every person, but the good news is that you only need 5 of them, because when you're doing quantitative testing, for every round of quantitative testing, you need a minimum of 20 people. That gets expensive fast, right? But for qualitative user testing, the recommended number is 5 people, and we can pick up to 85%, over 85%, of the problems with your product testing with only 5 people, right? So that is really affordable, and the average is generally around sort of the $100, $150 mark in whatever currency is your local currency. So if your regular audience is in China, you should be testing with Chinese people in their currency, and if you're testing in Australia, you should be testing in Australian currency, and you get the picture, right? But you should be at least rewarding them for their time. If you have an e-commerce site, maybe that looks like a voucher that they might never use, but maybe that looks like a 50% off voucher or something like that. Maybe it looks like giving them free shipping on the next order. It could look like something different to every organization. If it's internal, you obviously don't have quite as many of those rules because you are already paying them. So if you're testing with internal users, then you can just ignore this slide. I mean, you should still pay your team, but you don't need to pay them extra for participating in usability testing, just to be clear. So once we have recruited our usability testers, the next step is to work out what it is that we're going to ask them. And we don't start by writing tasks, and we're actually not even going to call them tasks. We're going to call them activities, and I'll get to that in a moment. But before we do any of that, we want to come up with some hypotheses about like what are the things we think might or might not be a problem that we want to test for. So we have 4 different kinds of research questions that we can ask. The easiest ones to understand are usability problems that we might have. So what is easy or difficult to do, and why is it easy or difficult to do it? Can this person submit the form? Right? That's a really, really easy example of a usability hypothesis that we might have. The next one is findability. And findability and the next one, which is discoverability, are a little bit different. So findability is, can they find a thing they know must exist, right? So has anyone ever been on an e-commerce website and looked for the shipping and returns page because you want to know like what their shipping looks like? You know that that page exists, right? You're like, this is an e-commerce site, there is a shipping page somewhere. But how easy or hard that is to find, that's an example of findability research questions. Discoverability, on the other hand, is things that they might not be sure whether they exist. So do I know whether there's an FAQs page? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. That's an example of discoverability. And the questions that we ask or the activities that we write for people are going to be different depending on whether it is findability or discoverability that we're testing for. And the last one, which is really, really hard to test for in qualitative usability testing, and I would even go so far as to say you probably shouldn't try, is engagement. Because there are lots of ways that we can measure engagement, and really we should be doing that using quantitative measurements, because it is very easy to do things like Hotjar or even just looking at Google Analytics to see how people are engaging, where they're going after they visit a page, that sort of thing. Doing it with 5 people is not going to get you good information about engagement. So we're going to focus on those top 3. And once we've got our research questions and we've identified, like, what are the things we weren't sure about? What are the assumptions that we made that didn't really have any evidence behind them at the time? And we were just like, my gut says this is probably the thing that we need to do. What are the things we argued about as a team? Like, there were surely things where the designer was like, we need to do this. And the developer was like, but we can't, we have to do this. And then the user was like, no, but I really want this thing. And you were like, yeah, but that's stupid. Right? Like, those things, those are the ones that you want to be writing your research questions based on those sorts of problems that you had during the process. So once we've got those research questions, we want to come up with some tasks that we can get people to do. We're not going to call them tasks when we put them in front of the users, because that feels like they're being tested, and they're not. We're testing the platform. So some example tasks that you might do is like sign up to a platform using a particular coupon, right? Or change your email address, right? They know that there's a way to change their email address. Can they find, and a good example here of findability and why we do both the research questions and the tasks is because if I was to say, I'm worried that people can't find my user settings, right? Like my account settings, which is the place where they change their email address. It's the place where they set their profile picture. It's where they decide whether they want light or dark mode. If I'm concerned that they can't find that thing, and I say, find the user settings, they're going to look for something called user settings, right? If I say, change your email address, they're still going to look for user settings, but we're sending them in with a little bit less preparation so we can see how they would actually use it in real life. Discoverability is things like, are they going to find out that they can do a particular thing? So an example here might be, use the tool to work out the most likely geographic location shown in this photograph. So let's say we've got like an AI bot that we've made and we want people to work out what the location is. Do they just type in words, there's a lake and some mountains, or do they realize that there's actually an option there where they can upload a photo? Right? So that's an example where we're testing for discoverability. Do they naturally find that they can do this thing? Because we haven't told them that that's an option, but they might go, oh, I see that I can do this here. That's excellent. I'm going to do that. And they've successfully created the task. So you can see that them being able to complete the task isn't actually the goal. Answering our research question is the goal. And with engagement, like I put an example in here. Again, I don't recommend that you do it in usability testing, but like find a place you would like to visit on holiday. Do they click around and like explore? Do they go to the you might also like, or like things like that are how we would test engagement. Again, please just go use any other method to do that though. All right, so when we're creating research tasks, I mentioned about like not giving them the answer. So if I tell you on this particular slide here, and I need to remember which ones I circled, so I'm going to go over to my notes, estimate how wealthy the family in the picture are. Right? Okay, what if I told you to give me the ages of the people in the family? If you were like most people, this is an eye tracking diagram. So when we're looking at how wealthy they are, often as well as the clothing that they're wearing, we're also looking at things like the furniture, right? When I am asking about their ages, you can see people's eyes typically will track to the faces, right? It's much the same when we're doing usability testing. When we are asking people to do something, the words that we use matter. The things that we ask them to do matter. So if you are telling them to look for a particular thing in the menu, or if you're asking them to find something and you're using the word of the thing that you're asking them to find, you're actually guiding them towards something even though you might not think you are. So you want to be really careful about the language that you're using there. All right, tasks can also be either exploratory or directed. So sometimes we want exploratory tasks for things like how interesting something is. Again, an example there would be like, you might also like. But quite often, we find it a lot easier to measure tasks that are directed, where there is some kind of end goal there, and you want to know what that end goal is. And there might be more than one. It might be that you've got particular content in 3 different locations, and you want to find like which of these locations is the right place to have that content, which place are people looking for it, and it could be that half of them go to one place and half of them go to the other, and the answer is actually it's okay to have that content accessed from 2 different locations, but it could be that they're all looking somewhere that you haven't even thought about. So having some kind of goal of like, this is what I expect people or want people to find in that situation is a good thing. But also don't get too tied up on like, there is a right answer for this, because the goal here is actually see how people use your technology. This particular eye tracking thing that I have up on there is actually a really interesting study, and there is a link to it in the notes that I've got at the end. So if you're interested in reading more about this eye tracking study and some more research in this space, I highly recommend checking it out. A lot of the examples and things that I give here today also come from a bunch of work that has been done by the Nielsen Norman Group, and I've done my training through them, and I highly recommend it if you're interested in this sort of thing. Just go check them out. Their blog is free and amazing, and there is a whole bunch of resources at the end that you can go and check out if you're interested in looking at sort of more research papers and stuff like that on this stuff. But right now, we are going to jump from sort of the hypothetical into the more specific and the things that you maybe shouldn't do. So when we're writing our tasks, we want to obviously think about the goal of what it is that we want people to do, but we also want to think about what we need to give them versus what we want to give them, because it's easy to fall into this trap of I need to make it realistic, or I need to give them enough context so that they know what they're looking for. And you actually don't, and you probably shouldn't. Try and avoid things like unnecessarily putting humor into it. It's really tempting because you want to lighten the mood and you know that they feel a bit awkward because it's not the most normal thing having to talk about what you're doing as you do it. But when you do that, you might inadvertently make them feel uncomfortable. You might distract them, saying something like, pretend a family member needs this thing. What if they don't have any family members, right? You've now got them thinking about how lonely they are, and actually you just want them to test your really cool website. Don't put yourself in those traps. Just keep it simple, stupid, and try and just focus on what they do actually need to be able to complete the task. On the flip side, don't leave out things they do need. So a really common example of that is if you're telling them to buy something, they're going to ask, what credit card do I use? Or is there a coupon or something that I should use? So tell them that ahead of time. Likewise, if they're filling out a form, should they be using their own personal information, or should they be using the information of a dummy person? If you can, I always recommend that they use their own information, and that should be part of sort of the terms and conditions that they agree to before they do it, because the whole point is that you are trying to test for things that will happen that you haven't predicted. I worked for a couple of years with someone who was a very dear friend of mine. Her name's Nethra. There's a very high chance that no one here has ever met her or worked with her, but she's amazing. She also went for most of her adult life with no last name. She was in the top 99% of the state with her TER score. She applied to get into medicine, and she didn't hear back from a single university with any offers. Not even a fallback offer, and it was because the system had actually just assumed that she wasn't a real submission because she didn't have a last name, and so she had just put a full stop in there because she had to put something in to satisfy the form, right? And we're all thinking about it right now of I've definitely made last name compulsory on a form because I've done it too, right? But maybe situations like that will arise if you are actually testing with real users. And if you are giving them fake information to use, then you're kind of doing yourself a disservice there. You've read the rest of them, so I don't need to explain all of those things to you. You'll have perfectly good eyes. So what does facilitating a usability test actually look like? And I think this is the bit that for most people is the scariest, but it's also the bit that we don't do particularly well. So here are the core do's and don'ts. If you don't take a photo, if you're the person that takes photos of slides, this is the one you should take a photo of, right? Because these are the things that you were both not doing and doing that you shouldn't be doing, all right? So always record your session. Always, always record your session. You should definitely be asking people to sign some kind of agreement beforehand. Again, the Mission Digital agreement of what they sign and agree to is on the Mission Digital website if you want to go and check that out. But make it really clear that you're testing the website or the product and not the user, right? I am very adamant about this when I first introduce myself as the facilitator, that we're not here to test. If they do something and they don't get to the answer, that is not a reflection on them failing the task, which we don't even call a task, we call an activity, because that way they don't see it as like, oh, there's a task and I have like a right answer at the end of it. If they feel like they've failed, you've failed, right? Because we are testing the tool, we are testing the platform, we are testing the website, whatever it is. We are not testing the human. They have done us a favor if they've found a bug, because we're able to fix that before it gets in front of the general population. The hardest possible thing about usability testing is it's really important that you get your participants to talk out loud. So does anyone talk to themselves while they're doing tasks? Yeah, you are the ideal usability testers, right? That's the one time where you can not feel weird about it. For everyone else, it's really awkward, right? So I will often actually get them to do a bit of a test task first. I get them to look for some fun filler text that they could use for a project, and the goal is just to get them to go to Google and then search for some kind of pirate lorem ipsum or something like that. And there's a video about showing me actually doing this test thing on YouTube if you want to go check it out. I didn't include it today because the last 2 times I've included it, the AV has exploded, so it was easier to just tell you about it this time. So ask them to think out loud, and if they stop saying anything and they're pausing or clicking around, don't be afraid to say, what's going through your head right now? But that's it. That's all you're allowed to say, right? You want to tell them the task that they're going to do, but actually you want to send them that task in writing because they will refer back to it. It's very common that when you're doing a usability test, people will read it up to 4 times while they're doing the activity. And it's a lot easier for people to process that when they can sort of read it and say, oh, what is it that I was actually meant to be doing at this point in time? But also it gets them into the habit because you ask them to read it back to you and they get used to the idea of themselves monologuing. Try and avoid everyone in the team being on the call, because that is even more daunting than stream of consciousness blabbing everything that's going through your mind to one person, is doing that in front of 7 people who are just awkwardly sitting there watching you. So if you do have spectators, get them in a room together. Make sure that their video is off the whole time. They're not allowed to say anything. If they want to ask a question, they should send that question to the facilitator, and it is the job, and only the job, of the facilitator to actually ask those questions to the user, hopefully in a way that's not going to lead them to an answer that you want, but in a way that's going to tell you something useful. This is kind of what it feels like. This is exactly what it feels like. Surely, if you just mute yourself, turn off your video, okay? While they're doing it, mute yourself and turn off your video. Then you can do that, and you can be like, why? All right? But they can't hear you. So it is really hard. I highly recommend that you practice it with someone that you trust before trying to do it with an actual user, because this face that she's put, I was like, I have never resonated with a GIF more in my life than this one after the first time I did usability testing. So it is so tempting to just give them a little hint or ask them, why didn't you do this thing? right? You can't. You're going to ruin the test if you do it that way. So restrain yourself. I believe in you. You are strong. You've got this, okay? And if you don't, call me and we'll go have some wine. This is my script. You're welcome. Another one that you can take a photo of, but again, it is at the end in all of my notes and stuff. This is all of the stuff that I talk through. It's not sort of word for word, because I've done this so many times that I can kind of give a version of this without looking at it. But you could literally just read out this script if you were running a usability test. This is all the important information that you need to tell people ahead of time. And then you also give them a little snippet of to read out that talks about how important it is that they do actually talk out loud. It's called the Think Aloud protocol. And the reason why we get them to read that aloud, again, is because it's such a weird and awkward thing to do that we want to try and train them as much as possible ahead of time to actually feel comfortable with that monologue process. So the last step is to iterate. And one of the most common questions I get asked is, how long should it take to do these tests? Should I wait until the last test to be able to start fixing things? And the answer is no. That's not the point, right? Because we're not looking for statistical relevance here. We're looking for what are the problems. So if I know that people don't understand, that at least one person, and not just one person, the first person that I tested with doesn't understand what a word means, do I just go, oh, that's probably not statistically relevant? Or do I go, if the first person had a problem with it, what are the chances that at least one other person is not going to have a problem with it? So if there are obvious things, fix them before you do your next test. Don't wait until you've already done 5 and then fix them, because then you have to do another round of testing, right? If you fix it and then you don't see that problem arise again, in the next 4 tests that you run, congrats, you've nailed it, right? It might also be that you try and fix it and you realize that we didn't quite nail it, so maybe the second usability test people do a little bit better, but they still don't crush it. And then that gives you an opportunity to keep sort of putting it through the ringer until you've actually got something that people want to and can use. Each time I get people to fill out a scorecard, this sounds like weird questions to ask. Okay, so I'm going to explain to you why we ask these particular questions. So the first one is, how easy or difficult was it to complete the activity? Right? So this one's really obvious, and we get them to say a number between 1 and 5. So 1 is it was really hard. 5 is it was super, super easy. 3 is it was neither hard nor easy. And then we ask them, how confident are you in your answer? Right? And the reason we ask this question is because we're actually finding out, was the problem with our software, or was the problem with our question? Was it that we actually gave them a task that they didn't really understand what it was that they were meant to be doing, and so they don't know if it was easy or hard because they don't know what success looked like? Right? So that's what that second question is actually asking here. If they say 5, I'm very confident that it was very hard, or I'm very confident that it was very easy, or I'm very confident that it was kind of okay, right? What that tells me is that they knew what the goal was, and they're confident in how easy or hard achieving that goal was. And then the last thing is, how satisfied are you with it? And this is actually more for appeasing your team. So, for example, let's say one of our activities is to find information about a particular topic, right? And it could be a topic that you know is really important to your audience. And it takes them 11 tries to find that particular piece of information that you know is really important and a critical part of your platform. Your team is going to be really disappointed. They're oh, we failed. They couldn't even find the thing, right? But when they do eventually find the thing, what if they land on that page and they're this content is amazing? You want that as well. You want to know that when they did actually get to the place that they were meant to get to, that what they got was good, but you also want to know if it wasn't. So this is a way of being able to kind of get a super extra bonus point of does our content suck? Or does the thing that we got them to find actually work, right? I put notes in here, but they're honestly not very important, and I don't often look back on them. They're more for things that they said that I want to dig into a little bit more later. What we actually do is we have a massive Miro board. Has anyone used Miro before? You can use whatever the heck you want. I use Miro because if I use sticky notes, then I take over our entire house or office space or whatever. So we have a screenshot of the page in question. So usually, let's say that there's 8 different pages that people are interacting with as part of the usability testing process. I will have like a column for each of those pages. And then for each of the users that I'm testing with, they get a color and a number. We try not to use names as much as possible because often we know the testers because particularly when it's an internal test, you have quite a limited pool of who you can actually choose from. So we give them colors, and that also helps us because then we can look at it and go, okay, on this particular page, we had 4 different colors, so 4 different testers have similar comments. But on this particular page, we had 1 particular tester have 11 different comments. So was it one person that had a really big problem or really positive feedback? Or was it that everyone kind of had something to say about that particular interface? Arrows, screenshots, things like that. What makes a good sticky note is something like, I might have known to go there first if there was an icon, or I tried the free text search and that didn't work, but then when I applied the filters or I went to this particular thing, I assumed that a keyword was required. This is useful. Do you know what is not useful? I liked it. I didn't like it. Like, what didn't you like? That's not useful feedback to be recording. So as you're going back through it, make sure that the things that you're pulling out are either direct quotes or something that's reproducible where you can be like, they had problem doing this activity because of this particular thing that I noticed. Make sense? Yes? So once we've done all of this stuff, we then put that together and come up with a bunch of recommendations for the team. Sometimes I am the team that's delivering the recommendations, and so I just go do it. Sometimes I'm doing this on behalf of a client, and so I will just give them a list of the recommendations and be like, these are the things people struggled with. You should go fix them. Here's some suggestions that they had along the way of how you might be able to do that, and they can decide to take or leave those things. So usability testing looks different depending on sort of who you are, what context you're doing it in. Are you like doing it as cheap as possible, as fast as possible internally with your team, or is this a thing that you're offering as a service if you're a freelancer? And hopefully that's given you a little bit of an idea about what that's going to look like. And if you have not picked up anything else from my talk today, hopefully the thing that you will take away is that you are not the user, and you should be testing with people who are. So I think pretty much everything that I covered today is in that QR code. So again, if you don't take a photo of anything else, that's the QR code. That's also where you can find me on socials. I am not on the platform formerly known as Twitter. I mean, I am. You can probably tag me, but I won't see it. So if you want feedback, don't go there. I am on Blue Sky. You can stalk me on LinkedIn. I accept most friend requests because I forget who I've met at conferences. So if you're just like looking to build your LinkedIn, there you go. Congrats. And I think we've got a little bit of time left. So I am going to attempt to turn on my questions. Let's try this. Someone just scan that for me and like tell me if it works. It does. Excellent. Thanks, Anonymous. You nailed it. So if you've got any specific questions, I would... Oh, that's not the right thing. Hang on. I don't know how to make it show the right thing. Oh, maybe I need to hide this. Hey, oh no, that's still the wrong thing. There we go, we can delete the poll. Does that bring it up? Hey, there we go, excellent, okay. Questions, what's the best way to answer when a participant tries to clarify an activity? Excellent question, use a mirror. So that's what we call it. So the default response when someone tries to clarify something, if it's a legitimate question that you need to answer, obviously tell them. So if it's something like what would be a good example of something where you would need to clarify, like, should I use my own personal information? Right, that is something where you legitimately might actually need to provide clarity there. But if they ask, does this need to be in all caps or not, when they're entering something in, I would say, what would you do if I wasn't here? So you're kind of turning the question back on them. So it's called a mirror response, and that is by far the best way to deal with that sort of thing. Can you talk a bit about in-person testing versus Zoom calls? I don't do in-person testing. It's really expensive and time-consuming, and the only good reason to do it is if it's really important that you're testing on mobile and that you're seeing what gestures and stuff people are using. So for app testing, definitely in-person is better. If you're testing predominantly on desktop, then you can just do it online, and honestly, you'll probably get better results because it's easier to record, it's easier to get participants in the room in the first place, it's just easier. I record using a tool called Fireflies, which is an AI tool that does a transcript for me. So it's really good because then at the end of it, I can just go like, hey, can you summarize this for me and tell me the important bits? I still go through and watch it myself, and I'm still taking notes as I go. But it also means I can search the transcript for particular keywords and be like, oh, that's what that person specifically said there. When you are mobile testing, I don't know if that is a thing that anyone has asked, but there is a way to do online testing on mobile, and the way to do that is using WhatsApp. It's the only way that I've reliably found to do it, and I actually use a combination of WhatsApp and OBS Studio, so I record the screen on my desktop, and I use WhatsApp on my desktop, but they share their screen on WhatsApp. It's not great, and I don't love it, but I've managed to do it with a 16-year-old, and they didn't fail. So if I can do it with a 16-year-old and I can do it with a 40-year-old, like, it's moderately accessible. When do you know if that's that user issue and you shouldn't change the website to fix their issue? I would really challenge yourself, is it likely that that is a one-person issue? Because statistically, the chance that one person will have that problem and every other person won't have that problem is really low, unless that person has a really, really specific reason why they had a problem with it. So I would always challenge your own thinking before challenging whether it's a user problem. Again, users don't use things the way that we expect them to. We just need to acknowledge that. I like this. Me too. Thanks. Does every app or website require usability testing? Depends how important it is. I'm not going to usability test my personal website, but am I going to usability test something that is potentially making me money? Yes. Am I going to usability test a product that people are relying on? Also, yes. It is by far the cheapest research method that you can use that will give you the biggest bang for your buck. So that's why we recommend it. I think we're just about out of time. Where's my MC person? Are we out? A few more minutes? Okay, I can keep going then. I still haven't been asked my favorite question, which I didn't have a good answer for at the time, but the question was, what's your favorite rock? Because I mentioned that I used to work in mining, and I was so disappointed because I didn't have a good answer for it. And then afterwards, my husband was like, you should have said Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I missed that opportunity, so Ross, that one's to you. Any tips on incorporating specific accessibility requirements with usability testing? Make sure that you know, make sure that you test with people who have accessibility requirements in the first place. I can't stress how important that is, particularly if those people are more likely to use your app or are more likely to have problems using your product. So we always try and have at least one person that has an accessibility challenge that they are experiencing. I've even got people in this room who have accessibility challenges that have done usability testing with me, so thanks. And particularly if you know that there are things maybe one of those activities that you do is do this thing entirely using the keyboard. There are ways that you can also incorporate accessibility into your testing. Another one of those is making sure people can do it on mobile or do it on laptop versus desktop. So we try and get a variety of devices because that actually helps us to pick up a lot of the accessibility problems. Is this something that can be done with user acceptance testing, or does it have to happen before that? I would recommend doing it before user acceptance testing, but it is different. You can do it at any time in the workflow. You can do it with things like Figma designs, but I wouldn't recommend it. If you can only do one round of usability testing, I would do it just before launch or just before user acceptance testing. Fix all the problems that come out of it, and then that way you're going into the UAT with the sort of strongest foot forward. Hopefully that answers that question, and I think I really am out of time now. So thank you, everyone. You've been a wonderful audience, and I'll see you around.
Thank you so much.